Dane Rosen. Thank you for joining me on this map of creating a valuable company, creating a valuable service. And I'll reference my own playbook because it's the one I know best, and it served me well. The first thing are these three questions. What do I believe in? What do I want to do? And how can I help? And one of the things in terms of how can I help that I asked myself was, what skills did I believe would be most valuable to the human species over the next 100 years? Now, if I was asking that question today, I might pick cultural design when we're looking at becoming interplanetary as an example, and you're starting a whole planet with 100 people. You have incredibly potent leverage at that moment to tweak variables on a cultural level that will determine as the culture grows how much rape, how much incest, how much addiction, how much intelligence, how much work-life balance. You have an incredible opportunity to tweak that, and you want to be doing that based on data. In other words, you want to be able to have the technology to design groups of 100 people who volunteer to participate in a certain type of culture and then measure the results. So cultural design. Another key and fascinating need for a skill in the next 100 years is managing garbage. What do you do with garbage? And this is an incredibly important question, and the technology of reclaiming energy from natural resources that have been transformed into something that we call garbage, meaning we take useful natural resources and we turn them into things we don't know what to do with, that capture energy. Turning that energy back into something useful for the ecology, either the human ecology or the natural ecology, is one of the single most potent and powerful things we can learn. Creative design, grounded, intelligent design, is a system of thinking that is incredibly potent. But one of the things that I had on my list was, and still is, sustainable horticulture. Learning to create and partner with the natural environment to create gardens, both edible gardens and ornamental gardens, that are more sustainable. The next, when I looked at what do I believe in, how do I want to help, and how can I help? My convergence was in developing the role of a sustainable landscape design and build company. Now, once you decide on an arena, and it's all about service, you're asking on a species-wide level, what kind of practices do you believe in, meaning you think would be good for the species? What will be needed over the next 100 years? And what do I want to do, which means I'll be motivated to do it well? Once you pick something, the next question becomes how to become incredibly valuable in that area. How do I become an expert in that field? And what is the field? For example, Amazon is not in the resale business. Amazon is in the selling time business or the saving time business. The reason that we buy on Amazon is they have made it easier to buy things meaning we save time. And if you understand what your business is, for example, my business is creating happy families through external environment. When I'm clear what my purpose is, it takes me out of the domain of landscaping very quickly. For example, in marital therapy and in marital relationships, you don't create a happy family if you spend over the budget of whoever's worried about the money. So I have a principle. I encourage clients to spend money based on what the most conservative person in the family feels, because gardens should be fun. When I understand that I'm in the happy family business through creating external environments, then there's a variety of things. For example, communication is actually more important than knowing the Latin names of plants. Latin names of plants don't create happy families. Good communication does. When you understand that money affects happiness a great deal, learning to help a client save money is helping them create a happy family. When you understand how irritating it is for jobs to be late, getting jobs done on time creates a happy family. So how can I get really fast or good fast at what I'm needing to learn? Now, when I asked this, I remembered Henry Ford Sr.'s strategy for building the Ford Motor Company, which was to surround himself by knowledgeable experts who he could consult with. He himself didn't finish high school, but he surrounded himself by knowledgeable experts. And so I thought that was a good approach. And so what I did was I formed mentorships with some of the leaders in 6 different sectors: concrete work, irrigation and design, horticulture, landscaping over septic systems, sales and business. And in doing this, by bringing those partnerings together, the different disciplines from different mentors together, my focus was to fuse them in a way that was valuable to my client. One of the next things that you do in any playbook is you get to know your client's problems. Now, you want to do this even more than you want to get to know your client's goals. And the reason is simple. The brain amplifies pain at a 5-to-1 ratio. So what that means basically is, your client wanted a daffodil, you gave them a daffodil. Your client wanted a tulip, you gave them a tulip. Your client wanted a rhododendron, you gave them a rhododendron. Your client wanted a stepping stone here, you gave them a stepping stone there. Your client wanted a little arbor built here, you built an arbor there. But the client wanted you to return your phone call, and you didn't. And they're pissed off. They're not happy because 5 things went well. They're pissed off because you didn't return the call, or you didn't you forgot to cover their car when you were bringing in something dusty. And they'd asked you to, and you forgot that. And they don't look and say, wow, this is so wonderful. They look at the one. So it takes one negative thing to wipe out the emotional impact of 5 positive things. This is just basic psychology. Now, what that means is if you can eliminate your client's fear, stress, and problems, if you can eliminate those and take 3 of those off the table, it's the same as doing 15 things good. So you want to start by reducing stress, friction, anger, frustration in your client. Now, when I asked my clients what they were upset about, it came down to three basic things: cost overruns, work not done on time, and reliable, responsive communication that let them know they cared but also followed through. That's really all my clients were upset about. And so I designed my business such that 80% of my jobs are done early, doing one job full attention until complete. That I'm the sole communicator so that there's no chance for confusion, and returning emails and calls the same day. And that everything is a fixed bid, so it can't go over. Meaning it may go over or under depending on what happens on the job. But if they have a fixed cost, that doesn't affect the check that they write. And then I do other things, such as if one member of the couple is saying, oh, we should buy this and we should buy that, and the other one is saying, no, we don't have the money, I side with the one who says we don't have the money. I say, look, it's just a garden. You can do more next year. Why don't you limit yourself to the terrain with me that you're both happy about? And then when you do it next year, when you have more money, etc., you'll both be on the same page. A marriage is worth more than a garden. Well, that makes them happy. And I think that's my job. So this is what are my clients' problems and how can I respond? Similarly, the people being confused and not knowing what they want is a big problem. So I created a big questionnaire. And couples arguing in front of me, they hate that. And so I give them the questionnaire ahead of time where they can have their debates, etc., and take their time, and they send it to me when they're ready. Now, 10x design is one of the things that is really valuable. And it begins with the question, how can I provide 10 times more value than I'm currently providing? How can I make 10 times more income than I'm currently making? How can my life be 10 times easier than my current life? 10x thinking is looking at a situation and having a clear goal that it's 10 times more successful. This is a very powerful paradigm, and it's a good thing to do at the beginning of a business, and it's also a good thing to do periodically and to weigh which is the most important, because you may be able to save 10 times more time, but that's not your key goal. You want to make 10 times more money, or you may be able to provide 10 times more value, but that's not your key goal. Your key goal is freeing up 10 times more of your time for hobbies or whatever it is. Now, another big question that I asked and answered is, can I promote with service? And I like this question because everyone needs to advertise. And there's a whole range of ways to advertise. You can pay Google, you can pay newspapers, you can pay Facebook, you can do a whole range of things to advertise. And the thing with that money, which may be 2%, it may be 50% of your budget, depending on the kind of business you're in, the key thing to be aware of is that if you pay Facebook $2,000 a month or Google or whatever it is, your client receives no value for that $2,000. And the community receives no value for that $2,000. And a lot of people who don't need your service, in my case, landscaping, a lot of people are exposed to that ad as an irritant, meaning they don't need my work. They don't want my work. They're trying to read an article, and my thing is blinking or, showing up on their app, and they don't want it. They're trying to play their game, not look at my ad. So I'm paying money to irritate a majority of people or provide no value. And the people that I do connect with, they're not, they don't benefit $2,000 worth. And so, the first thing that, in all of my different samplings, Yellow Pages and all that, I found that signs, little signs that cost $20, one $20 sign sometimes brings in $250,000 of work. It's not a bad return on investment. So that's one thing, and it's nice because someone who's out walking, for example, and seeing one of my gardens is saying, oh, I like that. I didn't like it before. I like it now. I'm going to be doing something soon. Who's the person who did that? And there it is. It's a useful thing, and it's not too much in their face. And I made them in color so that, they would be somewhat attractive to look at. But that's not providing a huge service. It's just meaning that they don't have to walk up to the client's house and knock and say, who did your landscape, which is a service because some people do that. If they really like the project, they have to go up and knock and disturb the customer. So having a little sign there is a great idea. But if we look at another couple of options, this is a book. It's called Successfully Landscaping Your Marin Home. And in it is 80% of all of my expertise. Meaning anything that I could think of that might be useful to a client is in here. This chapter is landscaping your septic or sewer system. The next is part 2, what makes a design great? Landscape questions to consider. If we go back here, integrating landscaping with your custom home or remodel, tips. It's how to save money. Any of the questions that I get from customers, like how can I save money? How do I do this? How do I do that? I answer them in this book. Now, this is a print-on-demand book. It costs me $4 per copy to have this shipped to me from Amazon as a self-published author. Now, it took me 3 months to write this book. So I sat down and wrote a few chapters every day until I felt I covered the whole topic. Then I ordered 10 copies and gave them out, and I got feedback. There's a typo here. Why don't you cover vegetable gardens? Where's the chapter on that? Okay, there's the chapter on that. And I made the second edition, sent out another 10 copies, made a third edition. And so this process, took 4 months. 4 months of my time, which is a big investment. However, this book brings in an average of around $100,000 a year in new work. Now, here's the analysis. So let's say that I spent $15,000 a year marketing. That's a reasonable thing if you're doing, $300,000 of work or whatever, 5% in advertising, something like that. So let's say I would normally spend $15,000 a year on Facebook ads, on this, that, and the other. Well, every year, in 10 years, I'd have spent $50,000 doing advertising. And nobody would know any of my knowledge and expertise. So my bet was basically, let's spend the $50,000 in time off work. Let's wait for downtime when it's rainy, when it's slow. In fact, I did this in the 2008 housing crisis. So my business was hit with a 50% 50% of my clients dried up overnight, which meant I had 50% more time. So I had a lot of time and half of my normal money. Well, this is way more useful to a client than money, and it's local. It's not for the United States, it's for my county. And everything written in here is local. Call so-and-so, he's a good guy, here's his number. When you're buying equipment, make sure you do this at this place. Buy this type of equipment here, but this type of equipment here. There's their phone number. You know the place, you're in the county. And here's why I buy here rather than here. And this is what I do here. And here's a link to some photos on my website to show what I'm talking about. Here's a link to a video. So this is a really useful tool. And if we assume that it took about $50,000 of my time off work, it didn't really, because in the 2008 housing crisis, I had plenty of time on my hands when nobody was calling. So I wrote and published and designed the cover of that book for less than $100 in cash. But I put in 20 years of experience in creating the content of the book, and I made it as valuable as possible. So that's an example of taking something that I could have just put $50,000 at $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year into marketing. And at the end of 10 years, I'd have spent $50,000 to $100,000 on marketing, and my clients would have zero value. This is what I call, can I promote with service? Similarly, teaching classes. I said, hey, I'm available to teach classes at this college and this college. And, then everyone in my county gets a pamphlet from the adult education colleges and says, Dane's teaching this class. And some of them see that and say, I don't want to take a class, but I'll call Dane. And some of my students take the class and say, that's great learning, but that's hard work. Let's call Dane. And some of my students learn a lot, do a good job on their own, and tell their friends, if you don't want to do it on your own, call Dane. So it's marketing through service, being useful. And so being useful as a teacher, being useful as a writer, being useful making videos. I did another book, after that. And sometimes I'll just be helpful. If I'm at a nursery or at a local place and I see someone with a question, I'll spend 5-10 minutes of my time, which might save that client a lot of money. Just trying to be helpful. That's not a good plant for this area because of this, this, and this, and they won't tell you that at this nursery because they like to sell that plant. And every so often, a job comes in from there. Similarly, I've put my book in all the local libraries, so to further, get it out there, etc. So that's, I think, just a general principle. If you can serve your public, with time and service, particularly what I liked about this book is I wrote it one time. It's 3 months once. It has helped hundreds and hundreds of people. It helps all of my clients. It helps people who aren't clients. And I just keep a few of them on hand. And I give them to my clients so that they can learn. And I also will sell them to a stranger or sometimes give them. It's kind of, a really nice thing. And it for me personally, saving time is the big deal. And so someone asked me a question like, hey, how do I amend soil? Well, that book cost me $4. I say, here, have a whole book. Read about it in depth. Enjoy. Took me two minutes. I'm on my way. But they know, there's someone who cared enough to write a book, someone who cared enough to help me explain it in detail. I did get benefit from that, and his phone number is in the front of the book if I need to call him. The 80-20 principle is just a good filter to look at business with. Where are 80% of your problems coming from? And what is the 20% of things that you can change that would solve 80% of those problems? Where does 80% of your income from? And what's the 20% of stuff you can do to create 80% more of your income? Which employee is creating 80% of your problems? And how can I swap them out for an employee who isn't? So this is a good thing to generally be aware of. For example, 80% of the tension on my jobs would come from clients coming out in the middle of the job and saying, hey, did we tell you about the boat that's going to be parked around the back of the garage? And I'd say, no, there's no mention of the boat around the back of the garage. They say, okay, well, there's going to be a boat around the back of the garage. And I'd say, well, the boat's not going to fit because you didn't tell me about the boat, and we've narrowed this area. We're going to have shrubbery here. There's no place for your boat. And they're like, oh. And they're mad. And they're mad at themselves because they didn't tell you about the boat. And they're mad at you because they thought you were the professional. But how did I know there was going to be a boat? And there's this kind of tension. It's just, and then, it causes a bubble in the schedule. And now the budget has to be budged, because now we have to change the design, and that takes money and all this. And so I can't deliver exactly what I said on time and on budget. So I now have a 6-page questionnaire. And what I've learned is that the clients who are intelligent enough to fill out the questionnaire and who are intelligent enough to appreciate what a great gift it is to have every possible question asked up front, what that means is I don't have to revise the design. My costs don't go up. I don't have to do change orders. And the project just goes like clockwork, and it's easy. So that one thing, here's my questionnaire, fill it out in writing before we meet and take your time. And then when we first get together, we'll go over all your answers. I'll make sure I understand you. And then I will make my suggestions and designs based on what you said was important to you. If you said you want to spend $50,000, I'm not going to give you $150,000 of ideas. I'm going to give you $50,000 of ideas. If you say you want to spend 2 hours a week maintaining it, I'm going to point out to you and say, hey, you said you want to spend 2 hours a week maintaining this. You've got an acre, and you say you want it filled with roses. That doesn't work. An acre filled with roses is 20 hours a week. You want to spend 2 hours a week. So what's it going to be? Are we going to give up the rose garden? Are we going to make the rose garden a tiny pocket? Or are you going to hire help? And this needs to be asked up front. Defining success, once you've got, it took me, I'd say, about 10 years to really master the whole terrain. Landscaping, frankly, is a very big terrain. You've got every aspect of art. It's like painting, but it's 3-dimensional and it's 4-dimensional. Your flowers don't just stay there year round. They get bigger every year. These start to die off. This blooms at this different time. You've got 4 dimensions. Then you've got concrete work. Then you've got welding. Then you've got lighting. Then you've got water features. Then you've got pathways. Then you've got fire safety. Then you've got water conservation. Then you've got low maintenance. Then you've got the budget, and this whole thing needs, and then you've got 2 different clients that want slightly different things. And this whole thing has to come together in a way that their family is happier than it was before you came along. And that's a big order. So, it's going to take some long hours, some hard work to become masterful, particularly if you're in a big field. However, defining success at this point is a really important thing to be aware of. For example, I've been very clear that I never want to be big. I don't want to be big. I like doing one job with full attention until complete. But I want to make more money. And so my question is constantly, how can I create more and more value for my client? And then make more and more money per hour that I work, and then take more and more time to invest in my relationships, my marriage, my hobbies, and my nonprofit. So, for example, I feel very successful right now in that area because I work 4 hours a day, 6 months of the year, and can sustain my lifestyle and my necessary nonprofit. I fund my nonprofit. And then that gives me 6 months of the year, like, this is playtime here. I don't make a dime. And if I do, if there's some pennies somewhere at some point that come in from Google or something, it's not making me $200 an hour. And, so what's it doing? Well, it's answering that question. What do I believe in? How do I want to help? How can I help? Well, I never got a map or a video like this from someone like myself when I was starting my company. And this would have been great. I would have enjoyed this. So I'm answering that question. So for me, defining success is being clear that having more and more freedom to spend spontaneous quality time the way I want to, and filling that out on a daily basis is where it's all at. Consider avoiding a key passion in your work. Now, this is just something to be aware of. My second choice was cooking. I love cooking. I've invented more than 1,000 different recipes. And I've cooked all my own food since I was 13 years old, with smell, with taste, with experimentation. And I enjoy cooking. And I don't think I would if I had to cook the same dish exactly the same on someone else's schedule. It's one of the reasons I became a landscape contractor, is, the customer wants that to be the same, whereas my landscape work, nothing is the same. Everything's different. Every client is different, and I can take a break. I may finish a job, and when the next customer calls, I say, I'm available in 2 months. Does that work for you? And if they say yes, then I say, okay, we'll do the design now, and then I'll see you in 2 months. And then I take off on a 2-month vacation and begin that job on time when I said I would. But you can't do that with cooking. And there's a lot of things that are not fun when you're doing it primarily to serve a client. I would say 80% of my work is not terribly fun, 80% of the time, because it's not coming from my own design sense. When you're being of service to a client, it's very much one of sublimating what I value. Like, for example, for me, I wouldn't even do landscape projects if I were many of my clients, because they're working, 50, 60-hour weeks. They're not growing their relationships. And then they're justifying all that hard, chronic work with the fact that they need to constantly keep up with the Joneses. And I'd say, fuck it. Take a few months, take 6 months, and revitalize your marriage. But that's not, up to me. They're calling me because they're in a mindset where, that's the thing to do. And my job is to listen and understand them and give them what they want. It is not to be as creative as possible. Most clients are freaked out by creativity. It's not to be as intelligent as possible. Most clients don't want to grapple with that either. What they want is for things to be relatively normal and proven and safe, and to, usually it's like, could we do something a little bit like this neighbor did over here, and a little bit like this, and we don't want to stand out, So, so this has nothing to do with, what would be the most beautiful garden 80% of the time. It's how can we get the old woman to walk safely down to her front door without tripping. That's the goal. And to do it as, efficiently as possible. So we're not in this domain of high passion and high art. We're in a domain of service. How can I help my customers? Now, when I stay focused on this, they love paying me lots of money. As soon as it starts to feel like, every so often I get tired of it and impatient, and I'm like, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And they don't like it because they didn't hire me to be about me for the most part. There's 10, 15% of clients that do, but for the most part, they've been looking at magazines and they've decided that this neighbor or this friend has a good idea, and they just want to stick with that and not think of things that are too outlandish, and that's what they want. So, I love inventing recipes, but if I had a restaurant, I couldn't invent 1,000 recipes. Because once someone came and liked the dish that they liked, then they want to come for the next 10 years and have that dish. And I understand that, because that's what I like in a restaurant. I like saying exactly what I ordered before. I figure out what my favorite dish is, or my favorite this and that and the other. And when I go to a restaurant, and I want that exact thing. So I understand that, but that's not fun to cook for me. Finally, I want to talk about the incredible power of clearly written goals that are created and reviewed every 5 years, every 1 year, every quarter, every month, every week, and every day. So the process that will accelerate 400 to 500% productivity. So these are in areas you want to move rapidly and potently. The process is simple. You start with the big goals. Where do you want to be in 5 years, etc.? So where do I want to be? But you have to break that down into all the logical steps you'd have to take to get there. I want to be a millionaire. And what's the logical step to get there? Well, I'm going to go from mowing 5 lawns a week to 30 lawns a week. Well, does the profit from 30 lawns a week multiplied by this times this equal $1 million? No, it doesn't. Okay, so I'm going to have 10 different people all doing that. Now, if the income from 10 different people all added up, would that be a millionaire? And calculated, and is that, can I? So then you have to create a plan that has accurate mathematics. You don't just create a plan, I want to be a millionaire, and then, or set a goal, and then no plan. You've got to have a series. If I did this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this, I think I could end up there. So this is a very important step. So you look at where you want to be, and it's generally the case that you underestimate what you can do with 5 years of potent work, and you overestimate what you can do in a day or a month. But once you have, where you want to end up, then for the next year, you pick things that you believe you can do, and you make an action plan for that. And then each month, you do things on that action plan, which means that every week you do things on the monthly action plan, and every day you do your daily chores and stuff, plus make incremental progress. And you review and you note. And if you change your mind, like, oh, I have a better idea here, you note it in there, and you may go back and change the monthly goal because you learned a better idea. That's fine. But you want this daily feedback, so that at the end of the day, you sit down and you say, okay, I did that, did 50% of this, did 40% of that, did all of that, did this that I didn't expect to do, tomorrow I'm going to do this, and you write that out. And you get up in the morning, you look at it. And in work and service related things, you can have a separate action plan. The goal list for the day might say go to work and work 4 hours. But your job plan for the job can be a separate document. It can be integrated or it can be separate where, again, you say I have to do all of this to get this job done. These are all my responsibilities to the client, and I'm going to need to buy this. I'm going to need to order that. I'm going to need to research this. I'm going to need to call this nursery and see do they have that plant. I'm going to need to go online and see if I can find an example of that type of fence. I'm going to need to go and buy this and then pre-paint this so that it's ready, for this kind of rainy weather. It'll dry in the garage because I've pre-painted it. So I'm going to need to do that. So then I'm going to need to clear out space in the garage for, pre-painting. And that means I'll need to get some brushes on hand and some paint on hand. So I need this and this and this and this. And you work on that and you build in redundancy, meaning about 20% of my work is experimental, meaning I've never done it before. And so I'll design a way I think will work, and then I'll design a second way or a third way that I think it'll work. And if they're not too expensive, I'll buy the materials and tools for all three, in the awareness that, at least in my business, keeping things moving at a good pace is the most important thing. So if I get to a job site and I say, here, try this and do this, and 10 minutes later the crew is saying, that doesn't work at all, look, it's breaking, this doesn't work, I go to plan B and I say, okay, good, we're going to try this and we're going to do it like this. Let me see if that works. And if it doesn't, we've got tool C. And, we fiddle around with it. And in this way, things keep moving, even though there will always be numerous setbacks. There will always be and in general, the principles that I operate with is minimum effort for maximum result. Think ahead. Always under promise and over deliver. Meaning why are 80% of my jobs done early? I don't work harder than anyone else. No. I look at a job and I think, should be able to do it in a week. I look at the client and I say, I'll have it done for you in 3 weeks. Well, most of the time it's done in 2 weeks because the crew surprised me with this, the weather surprised me with that, the tool broke down, the contractor that was supposed to show up said he had something else come up. So it's like, okay, the week took 2 weeks, but I said it would take 3 weeks, so it's a week early rather than a week late. And so that, over deliver, under promise. Minimum effort for maximum result. I see a tool on sale, I keep an eye out. It's like, let's set things up this way. I'm not finding my tools quickly, so let's carefully organize the toolbox and get this and this and this. Let's make a list of things that I could do. Sometimes I get an emergency like this. And so how could I prepare for that emergency and have it prepared in advance so I can just run in the garage, grab this case, and go out to the emergency? These are all, the techniques that help me create success in my chosen field and get better and better at it. With relatively happy customers, because I do what I say, I do it on time, and I do it for the agreed amount, and I respond immediately and proactively and demonstrate an interest in that family's well-being from start to finish. So good luck, and I hope this is a map that can allow you. I would close with a small narrative to say that this business started when I was 17 years old. I'd read Think and Grow Rich and Advanced Selling Strategies by Brian Tracy. I listened on my cassette Sony Walkman at the time, because when you're doing gardening and maintenance and stuff like that, you got 6-8 hours a day where I was working alone. And I started the company, going door to door. On one page was a letter that said, "Dear neighbor, I'd like to help you in any of these areas that I can do. Please don't hesitate to call. See reverse for references." And on the back, I had a list of 3 people who knew me, who said, Dane's honest. Dane does what he says he'll do. And if you need to talk to us, give us a call. And then I went around the neighborhood and delivered 250 of these. I would knock. "How are you? I'm your neighbor. May I leave you with a copy of my landscape flyer?" If they said yes, I gave it to them. If they wanted to talk, I talked with them. Before 250 flyers were out in the neighborhood, I had full-time work. And it's that simple. That's enough to get you out being paid to learn something. Because anyone can mow the lawn. Anyone can clean out the gutters. And I already had a few skills like compost making and pruning and stuff after that. But once you've got that basic income where you're being paid to learn as opposed to paying to go off and do something that's not helping anyone, and you've got an ear pad, an ear device that lets you listen. Now we have Audible, which is 100 times easier with muddy hands and stuff. You can listen to unabridged books. Once you're going in that direction, then there's an exponential curve. I'm listening on Audible. I listened to Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. I learned that virtual managers, virtual assistants exist. I think that's a good idea. So I hire one virtual assistant to find me a better virtual assistant. I find one, and we slowly work together. That person now takes 3 hours of my day out of my hands and escalates them, so that 3 hours more of tedious things that I don't like doing get done, that are good for the business. And while I now have all that free time of an extra 3 hours a day, then I listen to other books and learn this and learn this and learn this. And then I make videos like this to practice teaching what I learn, because now I remember it better. And sometimes when I'm making a video to teach someone else, I get a great idea. And so then I put that into action immediately. Another, principle is do it now. If at all possible, do it now. Take an immediate step. Write it down if you can't act on it immediately. Now that I have a virtual assistant, I send it to him, and I don't need a to-do list. I just, that's a good idea. I tap record. I say, "Hey, could you do this, 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 and this," and send it to me. When it's done, send. A few days later, I get a reply, all that's been done. I say, change this, change that, do that, and then that's done. It's wonderful. You learn, you build resources, you become more potent, you learn a little bit more, build resources, become even more potent. Good luck, and I hope one day to get an email from you saying how you've grown and sharing any bit of this process that has been pivotal in your well-being.